For Emma Caldwell, walking out had been easy. She left her husband Jacob and their newborn son in a rusted trailer on the edge of small-town Texas. No warning, no goodbye, just a note and a boyfriend waiting in a luxury SUV. She wanted freedom, money, a new life. And Jacob? He was just a mechanic with calloused hands and a crying infant left to figure out diapers, night feeds, and survival on his own. But Jacob never complained. He worked 2 jobs, built a business from nothing, and raised his son with love, structure, and quiet strength. 15 years later, they had a modest home, a thriving garage, and a scholarship letter on the fridge. Then Emma came back, not with remorse, but with a lawyer, claiming she was still the legal mother, demanding custody and a share of the estate. What she didn't expect was for the court and her son to see right through her. And what she didn't know, her boyfriend had left her broke and in debt. She wasn't coming back to reconnect. She came to collect. She thought it would go like it always had. But this time, she chose the wrong man. What would you do if someone tried to steal your child for money? Like and subscribe if family is about who stayed, not who came back. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the alarm in Jacob Caldwell's trailer had already gone off. It always did, 5:15 a.m. sharp. He didn't need it. His body was conditioned to the rhythm of necessity. Wake up, work, care for his boy, repeat. He swung his legs over the side of the bed with a grunt. The room was small, barely enough space for the twin mattress, a chest of drawers, and a plastic crib tucked into the corner. The crib was empty now. 15 years had passed since the night Jacob came home to find a note on the counter, a crying infant in the crib, and his wife Emma gone without a trace. Jacob, I can't do this. I deserve more than this life. Don't try to find me. He had stood there in silence, holding his son, wondering if more meant money, if more meant someone with a better car, if more meant less of him. He never got the answer, and he never asked again. Today, Jacob lived in a different world, one he built with his own hands. The old trailer was long gone. In its place stood a modest single-story house just outside Lubbock, Texas. It wasn't flashy, vinyl siding, gravel driveway, faded flag fluttering from the porch, but it was his. And more importantly, it was his son's. Ethan Caldwell, now 17, was the kind of kid you noticed right away, not because he was loud or cocky, but because he looked you in the eye when he spoke. Broad-shouldered, sharp-jawed like his dad, and thoughtful in a way that made people do double takes. Jacob had raised him to be kind but firm, curious but grounded. He wasn't interested in popularity or trends. He was more likely to be under the hood of a car or sketching guitar chords in a spiral notebook. Their mornings were quiet, simple, honorable. Jacob made black coffee, scrambled eggs, and 2 pieces of toast. Ethan always took the second piece, even if he wasn't hungry. You working the shop all day today? Ethan asked, sitting at the table in his Letterman jacket. He'd just made varsity, not that he bragged. Yeah, Jacob said, sipping from a chipped mug. The Walker Boys F-150 through a rod. Gotta pull the engine block. Ethan nodded. Need help. Jacob smiled. You got school, son. Focus on the future. Ethan grinned. The future is engines, Dad. And college apps. Jacob reached across the table, squeezed his son's shoulder. I'm already proud of you. The garage Jacob owned, Caldwell Auto and Diesel, sat on the edge of town. 6 bays. For lifts. Dust everywhere. A Coca-Cola machine older than some of the engines he worked on. It wasn't fancy, but it was always full. Jacob's name carried weight in town. Not because he was loud, because he was steady. He fixed problems. Didn't overcharge, didn't gossip, didn't miss child support because he'd never needed it. Everyone knew his story. Emma leaving, the baby left behind, the man who never complained, never remarried, never took a day off. He was the kind of man people respected quietly, the kind they'd bring pie to in December or slip an extra $1 on the invoice. Not because he asked, because he deserved it. Ethan's life reflected that same quiet dignity. He got good grades, had a part-time job at the feed store, took care of the dog, helped the neighbors. But Jacob knew, deep down, his boy had carried more weight than a kid should. He'd grown up without a mother and without a reason why, and Jacob didn't know how to fill that hole, so he gave Ethan everything else: time, effort, patience, and presence. The one thing Emma had never given either of them. One evening, as Jacob was closing up the shop, Ethan came running in with a white envelope. "Dad," he said, breathless. "It came." Jacob took the envelope. The return address, Texas Tech University. He handed it back. "You open it." Ethan tore the seal, unfolded the letter. His face froze. Then he looked up, eyes glossy. "I got in." Jacob smiled, wide, slow, proud. "Of course you did." Ethan handed over the letter. "With a scholarship." Jacob stared at the paper, blinking away tears he didn't want Ethan to see. They didn't hug. They weren't that kind of family. But in that moment, there was more love in the room than 1,000 embraces. That night, Jacob sat on the porch, beer in hand, the Texas stars above, the dog at his feet. He thought about how far they'd come, how close he'd been some nights to giving up, how he'd once held a baby in one hand and eviction notice in the other. And now his son was going to college. The garage was booked 3 weeks out. The mortgage was nearly paid. It wasn't luxury, but it was earned peace. He'd built a home, built a man. And for the first time in a long time, Jacob felt safe, until a knock came at the door. Late, unexpected. He opened it slowly, and there she stood, Emma Caldwell, blonde, expensive sunglasses, designer bag, rental car still running, like 15 years hadn't passed, like she hadn't vanished in the middle of the night, like she belonged. Jacob didn't say anything, just stared. Emma took off her glasses, smiled like nothing had changed. "Hi, Jacob," she said. "We need to talk about Ethan." Jacob didn't say a word for nearly a full minute. He just stood there in the doorway, looking at the woman who'd once promised forever, and then vanished without a trace, leaving a baby behind. She looked like a stranger now, makeup flawless, nails done, not a wrinkle in sight, but her smile was rehearsed, her eyes unfamiliar. "I know this is a surprise," Emma said softly. Jacob finally spoke. "What do you want?" Emma sighed and stepped closer, uninvited. "I just want to talk. Please." He didn't move aside. "Talk about what?" "About our son." That word, "our," hung in the air like smoke. They sat at the kitchen table. Emma didn't touch the coffee he offered. Jacob didn't touch her lies. "You've been gone 15 years, he said. "No calls. No letters. Ethan doesn't even remember you." Emma looked down, then back up, playing the script she'd prepared. "I wasn't ready to be a mother back then. I was scared, Jacob. You were working yourself to death. The trailer, it felt like prison. I made a mistake." Jacob's eyes were hard. "No, a mistake is burning dinner. You abandoned us." Emma swallowed, then dropped the pretense. "Well, I'm here now, and Ethan is still legally my son. I have a right to see him, a right to be in his life." Jacob stood. "We're done here." But Emma didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document. Jacob didn't take it, so she read it. A court order. Temporary petition for shared custody. Filed last week. You'll get your official notice Monday. Jacob blinked. "You've already filed?" "I'm not here for your permission," she said. "I'm here to prepare you." Then she smiled again, that same tight false smile, and said, "And just so you know, Texas favors maternal ties, especially in cases without formal custody papers." She stood. "I'll see you in court." After she left, Jacob sat in silence. Not in shock, in rage. He had survived years of grind, of loneliness, of waking up in the middle of the night to feed a child who couldn't understand where his mother went. He had fought for every inch of peace they'd built. And now this? He didn't tell Ethan right away. Not because he didn't trust his son, but because Jacob didn't want to put that weight on him. Not yet. He spent the weekend rereading every document he had. Ethan's birth certificate, old medical bills, tax forms, the original hospital sign-in sheet where Emma had signed as the mother and then disappeared days later. But she was right. There was no formal custody filing. He never needed it, Because she never came back. Until now. Monday morning, the envelope came, just like she said, official court notice, petition for partial custody, claiming Emma had re-established herself and wished to reintegrate into her son's life. Jacob read the language slowly. It was so clean, so distant, so hollow, like the lawyer who wrote it had never changed a diaper in the dark with no heat. He called his lawyer Tanya Reyes, an old friend from town who'd helped him file the business LLC years ago. She came by that afternoon. "This is serious," she said, looking over the papers. "She's hired a family law firm from Dallas. Big names. Slick tactics. She's broke," Jacob said. "How's she affording this?" Tanya looked at him. "She's probably banking on access to your assets. Or someone's bankrolling her." Jacob's jaw tensed. Her boyfriend. Possibly. Jacob sat down hard. "I can't lose him, Tanya. Not now. Not ever." "You won't," she said. "But we'll need to be smart. And we'll need Ethan." That night, Jacob sat Ethan down. The boy immediately sensed something was wrong. "Is it the garage?" he asked. "Are we behind on something?" "No," Jacob said. "It's about your mom." Ethan blinked. Slowly. "My mom?" Jacob nodded. "She came back." Ethan didn't speak. "She's filed for partial custody." Silence stretched. Then Ethan said, "She doesn't even know me." "I know. She doesn't care about me." Jacob's voice was rough now. "I know." Ethan looked away. His voice cracked. "She doesn't get to show up now. Not when everything's finally okay." Jacob reached out. "Hey, you're not going anywhere. No court, no lawyer, no stranger's opinion is going to take you from me. You hear me?" Ethan nodded, biting his lip. I don't want to have to see her. I don't want to be nice to someone who left us." "You don't have to be," Jacob said, "but we have to face her. Together." Over the next few days, things escalated. Emma's legal team filed requests for visitation. They painted Jacob as a controlling father who restricted maternal access. They cited Ethan's lack of contact with Emma as proof of manipulation, not abandonment. And when the media picked it up, just a whisper in a small paper, Emma played the victim. "I was young. I made mistakes. But I never stopped thinking about my son. Now, I just want to be part of his future." Then Jacob got the call that broke him. Tanya had pulled financials. Emma's lawyer had just submitted a motion to freeze joint inheritance rights under the argument that Ethan's trust fund was community-based and that Emma as biological mother had claim. "She's not after Ethan," Tanya said. "She's after the money." Jacob gritted his teeth. "She never cared about him." Tanya's voice was firm. "Then we prove it." That night, Ethan came home with something in his hand. A printout. From the internet. It was Emma. A photo. Her and her boyfriend. A man in a tailored suit, arm around her waist. The caption read, "Real estate investor cuts ties with partner amid fraud investigation." Ethan looked at his dad. "She's not coming back because she loves me. I know. She's coming back because she lost everything." Jacob put a hand on his son's shoulder. "We won't lose anything." But Emma? She was about to lose it all. And she didn't even know it yet. 2 weeks later, the court scheduled a preliminary custody hearing. Emma's legal team moved fast. They filed motions, used phrases like parental alienation and maternal reintegration. On paper, she looked like a model turnaround, clean employment record, even if it was only 6 months old, a stable relationship despite rumors her boyfriend had left, a newfound commitment to her son. She wore it all like a costume. But Jacob knew. Costumes tear under pressure. Ethan had barely spoken to her. She showed up to his school once, with a court-granted 10-minute visit. He stayed seated at a bench while she talked. "I missed you," she said. He stared ahead. "Name one thing about me." She blinked. I know you play football." He shook his head. "I quit last year. Knee injury." Emma smiled tightly, reaching for his hand. "I still love you." Ethan pulled away. "Love shows up. You didn't." Back at home, Jacob could feel the stress taking its toll. He wasn't sleeping. The garage was running, but slower. Some clients noticed the dark circles under his eyes. Some quietly offered help. He always refused. But Tanya Reyes wasn't so polite. "We need more than emotion, Jacob," she said, dropping a binder on his dining table. "We need proof of everything. That you were the sole provider. That she was absent. That Ethan was never just fine, he thrived." Jacob nodded. "You'll get it." She paused, then added, "There's something else." She slid over a printed document, a financial disclosure. It was a request from Emma's lawyers to assess the valuation of Caldwell Auto and Diesel. "They're not just going for custody," Tanya said. "They want a claim in the business and the trust fund." Jacob's knuckles went white around the page. This was supposed to be Ethan's. That night, Jacob sat Ethan down again. "I'm not going to lie to you," he said. "They're trying to say I kept you from her, that I poisoned you against her." Ethan laughed once, dry and bitter. "I didn't need anyone to poison me, Dad." She walked out. Jacob hesitated. "They'll try to dig into our past, into mine, my finances, my decisions." "I don't care," Ethan said. "I know who raised me." But later that night, Jacob heard his son crying through the wall. Not loud, not angry, just tired, and that hurt more than any courtroom threat. Emma wasn't done. She staged a local TV interview. Wearing soft colors, sitting in a garden, she tearfully spoke about her regrets, her healing, and how she wanted to reconnect with the child I never stopped loving. "There were reasons I had to leave," she said, "but I've worked hard to become the kind of mother he can be proud of." The story spread across Facebook, picked up by a local mom blogger. Some people bought it, some didn't. But Jacob knew this wasn't just a custody fight anymore. It was a PR war. That week, Tanya found something, a paper trail. Emma had co-signed on multiple credit cards with her ex-boyfriend, totaling over $60,000 in debt. And the boyfriend? Gone. Not just emotionally, legally. He was under investigation for fraud and identity theft in 2 states. Emma's name was on most of the paperwork. The image of the stable mother was starting to crack. Still, court didn't care about speculation. They cared about patterns. So, Jacob did something he hadn't done in over a decade. He opened the storage box in the attic. Inside, medical receipts, report cards, soccer team photos, letters from Ethan's teachers, birthday drawings, a copy of the baby formula bill from the first month she left. He took photos of everyone. Each page said the same thing. He stayed. She didn't. Then Ethan surprised him. "I want to testify," he said. Jacob stared. "You don't have to." "I know, but I want to. If this goes to court, I want them to hear my voice. Not just lawyers." "You sure?" Ethan nodded. "I'm not a little kid anymore. I don't need protection. I need to speak." Jacob nodded, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a breath of hope. A few days later, they met with a court-appointed family counselor, a standard step in contested custody cases. Emma was there too. She came dressed in white, soft-spoken, perfect posture. But Ethan came with fire in his bones. "I don't want to live with her," he said directly. "She is your biological mother," the counselor noted. "It's common for children to have unresolved feelings." "I have nothing unresolved," Ethan said. "She left me. She never looked back. She doesn't know who I am. She just wants what I have." Emma flinched. Ethan looked at her and said, "You're 15 years too late." The counselor made notes, said nothing, but her expression spoke volumes. Emma tried to fake a tear, but it didn't land. Not this time. That night, Jacob and Ethan made dinner together. Just burgers and sweet potato fries. They didn't talk about court. They didn't talk about Emma. They just laughed, like they used to, like a storm hadn't been brewing for weeks. And in that moment, in that kitchen with the sound of oil crackling and 2 plates on the table, Jacob realized something. They weren't just fighting to keep their life. They were fighting because they had built something worth protecting. The pressure kept coming. Emma's team filed one more motion, full custody, citing financial imbalance and emotional manipulation. But Tanya was ready, and so was Ethan. And soon, so would be the judge. The morning of the custody hearing, the courthouse parking lot was already full. Jacob sat in his truck with the engine off, staring through the windshield at the double glass doors ahead. He'd been through a lot of things in his life, raising a baby alone, losing jobs, fighting to keep food on the table, but this was a different kind of weight. Not just because of what he could lose, but because of who he might lose to. Ethan sat beside him in a dress shirt and clean jeans. His knee bounced nervously. "You ready?" Jacob asked. Ethan exhaled. "As I'll ever be." They stepped out together. The courtroom wasn't large, but it felt like a theater. Emma was already inside, seated with her two lawyers, hair pinned tight, makeup perfect, back straight. When she saw them, she smiled, like they were arriving to a family reunion. Jacob didn't return it. Ethan didn't even look her way. At the front sat the judge, Honorable Marion Keller, known for being fair but unsentimental. Her robe was spotless, her eyes sharp. Tanya leaned toward Jacob. "She's not interested in emotion. She wants evidence." Good. That he had. The proceedings began. Emma's lawyers spoke first. They painted her as a woman who had made mistakes, yes, but who had grown, who had returned not to disrupt, but to heal. They cited her new job, her counseling, her financial stability selectively edited, and her intention to repair the broken maternal bond. Jacob sat still, stoic, angry, but composed. Then they turned to him. "She withheld contact," one lawyer said, "did not attempt to reach out to the mother. Framed the child's perception." Tanya stood. "Objection. The child's perception is based on reality. The mother left and never returned for 15 years. The judge nodded. "Sustain. Let's stick to documented facts." Then it was Jacob's turn. Tanya guided him through the evidence. Ethan's full-time residency, school records, health insurance, the baby formula receipts, the lack of any support, financial or otherwise, from Emma. The judge flipped through each page slowly, carefully. Jacob's voice never wavered. "I raised my son. She didn't call, didn't write, not once." Emma shifted in her seat. When she was asked directly why she'd never made contact, she responded, "I thought it would be worse to come back after leaving." The courtroom was silent. Then the judge said, "But now you want custody?" Emma nodded. "I've changed." The judge sighed. "Let's hear from the child." Ethan stood, walked to the witness chair. Jacob's heart pounded. His son adjusted the mic, then looked straight at the judge. "My mom left when I was a baby. I don't remember her. I only remember my dad. He's been everything. Coach, cook, nurse, teacher, all of it." Judge Keller listened without interrupting. "He never made me hate her. He never even talked bad about her. I asked about her once when I was 8. He said, 'She had her reasons, but they weren't your fault.' He looked at Emma now. 'But I know now. She didn't come back for me. She came back because her life fell apart.'" Emma gasped quietly. The courtroom stayed silent. "I don't want to live with her. I don't want her to control anything about my future. I'm not angry. I've already got a family." He looked back at Jacob. "This is my home. He's my home." The judge called for a recess. Jacob and Ethan stepped out into the hallway, both shaking a little, not from fear but release. Tanya walked out behind them. "You nailed it," she said, "but they're not backing down." As if on cue, one of Emma's lawyers approached. He was calm, calculated. "We'd like to propose a compromise," he said. Jacob crossed his arms. "No, you haven't even heard it. I don't need to." The lawyer adjusted his tie. "We could avoid dragging financials into this." That's when Tanya stepped in. "Oh, please do," she said coolly. "Let's bring up the $60,000 in debt tied to your client's ex. Let's talk about the falsified work history. Let's subpoena bank records." The lawyer blinked. Tanya leaned in, smiled. "Your move." Back in the courtroom, Judge Keller reconvened. She looked at Emma directly. "You've given me a complicated situation, but not a confusing one." Emma straightened. "The law does favor maternal rights," the judge continued, "but not at the cost of child stability, not at the cost of truth." She paused. "You walked away. You never returned. Until there was money on the table." Emma opened her mouth to protest. The judge raised a hand. "Don't. Not now." Then turned to Ethan. Mr. Caldwell, you are of sound mind and your wishes are clear. The court respects that. To Jacob, Mr. Caldwell, full physical and legal custody remains with you. And to Emma, you are granted no custodial rights. Visitation may be reconsidered after psychological evaluation and financial transparency. But for now, you are not fit. Emma stood up, stunned. Her lawyer whispered for her to sit. She didn't. Instead, she turned to Jacob. I needed help, she hissed. You could have forgiven me. That week, Tanya found something. A paper trail. Emma had co-signed on multiple credit cards with her ex-boyfriend, totaling over $60,000 in debt. And the boyfriend? Gone. Not just emotionally, legally. He was under investigation for fraud and identity theft in 2 states. Emma's name was on most of the paperwork. The image of the stable mother was starting to crack. Still, court didn't care about speculation. They cared about patterns. So, Jacob did something he hadn't done in over a decade. He opened the storage box in the attic. Inside, medical receipts, report cards, soccer team photos, letters from Ethan's teachers, birthday drawings, a copy of the baby formula bill from the first month she left. He took photos of everyone. Each page said the same thing. He stayed. She didn't. Then Ethan surprised him. I want to testify, he said. Jacob stared. You don't have to. I know, but I want to. If this goes to court, I want them to hear my voice. Not just lawyers. You sure? Ethan nodded. I'm not a little kid anymore. I don't need protection. I need to speak. Jacob nodded, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a breath of hope. A few days later, they met with a court-appointed family counselor, a standard step in contested custody cases. Emma was there too. She came dressed in white, soft-spoken, perfect posture. But Ethan came with fire in his bones. I don't want to live with her, he said directly. She is your biological mother, the counselor noted. It's common for children to have unresolved feelings. I have nothing unresolved, Ethan said. She left me. She never looked back. She doesn't know who I am. She just wants what I have. Emma flinched. Ethan looked at her and said, You're 15 years too late. The counselor made notes, said nothing, but her expression spoke volumes. Emma tried to fake a tear, but it didn't land. Not this time. That night, Jacob and Ethan made dinner together. Just burgers and sweet potato fries. They didn't talk about court. They didn't talk about Emma. They just laughed, like they used to, like a storm hadn't been brewing for weeks. And in that moment, in that kitchen with the sound of oil crackling and 2 plates on the table, Jacob realized something. They weren't just fighting to keep their life. They were fighting because they had built something worth protecting. The pressure kept coming. Emma's team filed one more motion, full custody, citing financial imbalance and emotional manipulation. But Tanya was ready, and so was Ethan. And soon, so would be the judge. The morning of the custody hearing, the courthouse parking lot was already full. Jacob sat in his truck with the engine off, staring through the windshield at the double glass doors ahead. He'd been through a lot of things in his life, raising a baby alone, losing jobs, fighting to keep food on the table. But this was a different kind of weight. Not just because of what he could lose, but because of who he might lose to. Ethan sat beside him in a dress shirt and clean jeans. His knee bounced nervously. You ready? Jacob asked. Ethan exhaled. As I'll ever be. They stepped out together. The courtroom wasn't large, but it felt like a theater. Emma was already inside, seated with her 2 lawyers, hair pinned tight, makeup perfect, back straight. When she saw them, she smiled, like they were arriving to a family reunion. Jacob didn't return it. Ethan didn't even look her way. At the front sat the judge, Honorable Marion Keller, known for being fair but unsentimental. Her robe was spotless, her eyes sharp. Tanya leaned toward Jacob. She's not interested in emotion. She wants evidence. Good. That he had. The proceedings began. Emma's lawyers spoke first. They painted her as a woman who had made mistakes. Yes, but who had grown. Who had returned not to disrupt, but to heal. They cited her new job, her counseling, her financial stability selectively edited, and her intention to repair the broken maternal bond. Jacob sat still, stoic, angry, but composed. Then they turned to him. She withheld contact, one lawyer said, did not attempt to reach out to the mother. Framed the child's perception. Tanya stood. Objection. The child's perception is based on reality. The mother left and never returned for 15 years. The judge nodded. Sustain. Let's stick to documented facts. Then it was Jacob's turn. Tanya guided him through the evidence. Ethan's full-time residency, school records, health insurance, the baby formula receipts, the lack of any support, financial or otherwise, from Emma. The judge flipped through each page slowly, carefully. Jacob's voice never wavered. I raised my son. She didn't call, didn't write, not once. Emma shifted in her seat. When she was asked directly why she'd never made contact, she responded, I thought it would be worse to come back after leaving. The courtroom was silent. Then the judge said, But now you want custody? Emma nodded. I've changed. The judge sighed. Let's hear from the child. Ethan stood, walked to the witness chair. Jacob's heart pounded. His son adjusted the mic, then looked straight at the judge. My mom left when I was a baby. I don't remember her. I only remember my dad. He's been everything. Coach, cook, nurse, teacher, all of it. Judge Keller listened without interrupting. He never made me hate her. He never even talked bad about her. I asked about her once when I was 8. He said, she had her reasons, but they weren't your fault. He looked at Emma now. But I know now. She didn't come back for me. She came back because her life fell apart. Emma gasped quietly. The courtroom stayed silent. I don't want to live with her. I don't want her to control anything about my future. I'm not angry. I've already got a family. He looked back at Jacob. This is my home. He's my home. The judge called for a recess. Jacob and Ethan stepped out into the hallway, both shaking a little, not from fear but release. Tanya walked out behind them. You nailed it, she said, but they're not backing down. As if on cue, one of Emma's lawyers approached. He was calm, calculated. We'd like to propose a compromise, he said. Jacob crossed his arms. No, you haven't even heard it. I don't need to. The lawyer adjusted his tie. We could avoid dragging financials into this. That's when Tanya stepped in. Oh, please do, she said coolly. Let's bring up the $60,000 in debt tied to your client's ex. Let's talk about the falsified work history. Let's subpoena bank records. The lawyer blinked. Tanya leaned in, smiled. Your move. Back in the courtroom, Judge Keller reconvened. She looked at Emma directly. You've given me a complicated situation, but not a confusing one. Emma straightened. The law does favor maternal rights, the judge continued, but not at the cost of child stability, not at the cost of truth. She paused. You walked away. You never returned. Until there was money on the table. Emma opened her mouth to protest. The judge raised a hand. Don't. Not now. Then turned to Ethan. Mr. Caldwell, you are of sound mind and your wishes are clear. The court respects that. To Jacob, Mr. Caldwell, full physical and legal custody remains with you. And to Emma, you are granted no custodial rights. Visitation may be reconsidered after psychological evaluation and financial transparency. But for now, you are not fit. Emma stood up, stunned. Her lawyer whispered for her to sit. She didn't. Instead, she turned to Jacob. I needed help, she hissed. You could have forgiven me. In the town, people slowly moved on. The drama faded from front porches. Emma's name was no longer on lips. It was a ghost behind curtains. But the respect for Jacob? That stuck. The diner started giving him free coffee. The school invited him to speak on fatherhood and resilience. A local nonprofit asked him to mentor teen dads. Jacob wasn't used to it. Why me? He asked the director. She smiled. Because you did it without applause. That's exactly why you deserve it. Tanya stopped by one afternoon with final documents. Custody is fully closed, she said. No appeals filed. You're good. Jacob exhaled. Thank you, Tanya. For everything. She raised an eyebrow. You know, I've seen a lot of cases. But this one, she looked toward Ethan's guitar in the corner. This one made me believe again. That love really can win. Quietly. Then came the garage surprise. One day, Jacob pulled up to find a small film crew outside. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. Ethan smiled. "They're from a news site, doing a follow-up video. I told them you wouldn't want it flashy." Jacob scowled. "I don't want it at all." But the reporter stepped up. "Just 5 minutes. We're not here for drama. We're here for example." So Jacob stood in the bay, oil on his hands, truck lifted behind him, and simply said, "I didn't raise my son to hate anyone. I raised him to recognize truth. And truth is, parenting is about presence, not DNA, not court papers, not clean exits." That clip went viral. Again, one email stood out. It was from a father in Minnesota. "I watched your video with my son. His mom walked out when he was 2. I've never remarried. I never thought anyone would understand. Thank you. You made me feel seen. We're rooting for you down here." Jacob read it twice, then printed it, and pinned it on the wall of the garage, right next to a photo of Ethan in his graduation cap. But even peace needs space to breathe. So Jacob took a few days off, first time in years. He and Ethan drove out to a cabin near the lake. Just the two of them. No phones, no courtrooms, no ghosts. They fished. They cooked over fire. And one night, as they stared at the stars, Ethan said, "You think I'll ever forget this year?" Jacob chuckled. "I hope not." Ethan looked over. "I mean the bad parts." Jacob took a breath. "No, but you'll outgrow them. They'll hurt less, and they'll remind you who you are." Ethan nodded. "Like scars." "Exactly." Before they left the cabin, Ethan handed Jacob a small gift, wrapped in a bandana. Inside, a hand-carved wooden keychain, engraved with 2 words, "Stayed strong." Jacob blinked hard, then hugged his son, really hugged him. For the first time in a long time, they didn't need to say anything. The past had already spoken. Now, it was time to build something new. Across the state, Emma received one final letter. From her landlord. Eviction notice. No response from the lawyer she once paid. No call back from the old friend she once used. Just a suitcase. Again, she folded the paper, sat on the mattress, and for the first time, felt exactly what she once caused. Being left behind. Spring in Texas always came with sudden warmth, like the land itself was trying to shake off the cold of winter and say, "You made it." For Jacob Caldwell, it felt like the first time in years that those words actually applied to him. He'd made it. Through court, through silence, through watching someone walk away and never come back, and still finding a way forward. But this time, people noticed. It started small. The grocery store clerk, the same one who used to watch him bring in baby formula and diapers with food stamps, handed him his change and said, "You're a damn good father, Mr. Caldwell. Whole town knows it." Then, the pastor of the small community church invited him to speak during the Father's Day service. "We want the kids to hear about commitment," he said. "Not the kind that posts online. The kind that just shows up every day." Jacob hesitated. He wasn't a preacher. But Ethan nudged him. "Go. Just be real." So he did. He stood in front of the congregation in a collared shirt that didn't quite fit, hands calloused, voice steady. And he spoke. "I didn't have all the answers. I still don't. But when my wife left, I had a baby in my arms and no plan. So I just stayed. I stayed through the tantrums. I stayed through the nights he cried and I didn't know what to do. I stayed through the years he asked about her. And I never badmouthed her, not because she didn't deserve it, but because my son didn't deserve the weight of my anger." He paused, voice thickening. Being a father isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. Every day. No matter what. The church was silent. Then one person clapped. Then another. And soon, the whole room was on its feet. Jacob didn't know what to do with the applause. So he just bowed his head and whispered, "Thank you." Later that week, Ethan came home with something in his hands. A letter, handwritten, from his guidance counselor. "Ethan, when I first met you, I thought, here's a kid with a chip on his shoulder. But now I know better. You didn't have a chip. You had a standard, one that came from your father. You carry his quiet strength, his loyalty, and his fight. No matter where you go next, you take that with you. And it'll take you further than any degree ever could. Ethan gave it to Jacob and said, I think this belongs to both of us. At the garage, business picked up. People came from neighboring towns, not just for engine work, but to shake the hand of the man they'd read about online. A young man named Miguel pulled up one morning with a battered Honda. He handed Jacob his keys and said, My dad left when I was 5. Mom worked 3 jobs. But seeing your story, it made me realize I can still be a good man, even without a model. Jacob didn't respond with words. He just fixed the car for free. Then came a phone call from a nonprofit based in Austin. They'd seen the video interview. They ran a program for young fathers, and they wanted Jacob to speak. Just come and talk, the woman said. You don't have to be polished. Just be you. He said yes. And when he stood in front of a room of scared, exhausted 20-something men holding babies, he said, You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be rich. You don't even have to know what the hell you're doing yet. You just have to stay. Show up. Feed them. Hold them. Tell the truth. And when they grow up, they won't remember if the lights went out once in a while. They'll remember you. Afterward, one of the dads, maybe 21, tattoos up his neck, came up and said, I was going to give my kid to foster care. But you made me think maybe I can do it too. Jacob nodded. You can. He didn't need a trophy. He had something better. Proof. Back in Lubbock, something else was happening too. Ethan was preparing for graduation. He practiced his speech late at night, pacing the living room while Jacob pretended not to listen. Then came the ceremony. Families packed the bleachers. Jacob sat near the front, flannel shirt, jeans, clean boots. Ethan took the stage, looked out over the crowd, and said, Most of us are taught that success means proving people wrong. But I was raised by someone who never cared about being right. He just cared about doing what's good. My dad never made excuses, never complained. He just gave, every day, quietly. And because of that, I stand here today. This diploma isn't just mine. It's ours. Jacob didn't cry easily, but when Ethan pointed at him from the podium and said, I love you, Dad. You saved my life. Jacob lowered his head and let the tears fall, not from pain, but from recognition. That night, they had a cookout. Neighbors brought food. Friends brought hugs. Tanya brought wine. Jacob stood at the grill, flipping burgers, when a woman approached. She had gray hair, bright eyes, and a soft voice. You don't know me, she said, but I knew Emma. Long ago. I want you to know you did the right thing. For you. For him. For all of us who couldn't. Jacob didn't ask for details. He just nodded and handed her a plate. As the sun set, Ethan picked up his guitar and played. The same melody Jacob had heard weeks before. But this time it had words. Simple. Honest. You stayed when she left. You worked while I slept. You loved with your hands. And your silence, not plans. Now, the world knows your name. But I always did. Jacob sat back in his chair, listened, watched, and knew. He didn't need revenge. Didn't need to win. Didn't even need to be remembered by everyone. Because he had already been seen. By the only person who mattered. 2 months after Ethan's graduation, the garage looked different. Not bigger. Not fancier. Just more alive. Jacob had finally taken Tanya's advice and hired 2 apprentices, both in their early 20s, both new fathers, both trying to make ends meet. One of them, Carlos, had a daughter who just turned 1. The other, Raymond, was navigating co-parenting with his ex. Jacob didn't just teach them engines. He taught them discipline, focus, and how to pack a peanut butter sandwich while holding a baby on your hip. I'm not just paying you to fix brakes, he'd say. I'm paying you to show up, like your kid depends on it. Because he knew. Sometimes that was the only thing holding a man together. Ethan had left for Texas Tech in mid-August. The morning he packed up the truck, Jacob tried to stay calm. But his hands shook as he folded Ethan's last set of clean laundry into a duffel bag. You sure you don't want to stay local? He joked, not really joking. Ethan grinned. You'd be calling me every hour. Jacob smirked. Damn right I would. They stood beside the truck in silence. Then Ethan said, "You coming with me to unload?" Jacob hesitated, but Ethan added, "We start this road together, we finish it the same way." So Jacob rode with him all the way to campus. After move-in, they stood in front of the dorm. Ethan was quiet. Jacob handed him a folded envelope. Inside was a simple note. "No matter how far you go, this is home. Call when you're low. Call when you're high. Just call. Love, Dad." Ethan folded it carefully. "I'm going to hang this on the wall." Jacob nodded, right next to the damn fire alarm. They hugged, short but real. And as Jacob drove back alone, sun sinking behind the plains, he didn't cry. He smiled, because legacy doesn't live in buildings. It lives in people who carry your words, even after they stop needing your help. Back home, the garage kept rolling. One afternoon, Carlos stayed late. He'd gotten into an argument with the mother of his child. He looked tired, defeated. Jacob handed him a soda and sat beside him on the bumper of an old Chevy. "You ever feel like you're doing it all wrong?" Carlos asked. "All the time," Jacob said. "Difference is, I kept showing up anyway." Carlos stared at the floor. "I think I'm scared I'll end up like my own dad. Left before I was born." Jacob looked him in the eye. "Then make one promise. Don't run. Even when you're tired. Even when it's hard. Even when she says she doesn't need you. Your kid still does." Carlos nodded slowly, and for the first time, Jacob saw a little more strength in his spine. At the community center, Jacob now spoke every other month. Not speeches, just circles. Fathers, sons, sometimes even daughters. He told stories. How to change a tire. How to calm a baby at 3 a.m. How to forgive someone who never asked for it. How to build a life from nothing and still keep your heart soft. People didn't clap. They leaned in, because what Jacob gave them wasn't performance. It was permission to try, to fail, to show up anyway. One evening, after a long day, Jacob found a letter waiting for him at the shop. No return address. Inside, a drawing. Crayon. Child's handwriting. It showed a man holding a baby in one arm and a wrench in the other. Below it, 3 words. "You helped Dad." There was no name. But that was okay. He pinned it next to Ethan's graduation photo. 2 legacies. 1 wall. Back at Texas Tech, Ethan was doing well. One night, he called Jacob on FaceTime. "Hey, old man," he said. Jacob grinned. "Hey, college boy." Ethan spun his camera around to show a group of students gathered in a dorm lounge. "We watched your video," one girl said. "He made us all cry." Ethan chuckled. "They've started calling you Garage Yoda." Jacob rolled his eyes. "Do I look like I got green skin?" "Wisdom, Dad, not wrinkles." Jacob laughed. Then Ethan said, quietly, "I told him everything. About Mom. About the court. About you." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "You okay with that?" "I think it's part of me now. But it doesn't own me." That hit deeper than he expected. Because that was the legacy. Not carrying pain, but transforming it. Later that night, Jacob pulled out an old notebook. Inside were the bills he'd once used to measure survival. Now, he flipped it to a fresh page. At the top, he wrote, "What I want to leave behind." And below it, a show up. Tell the truth. Teach the next one. Never let your child feel disposable. Forgive without forgetting. Build something, even if no one notices. Be the proof that staying matters. Legacy doesn't need a last name. Doesn't need headlines. Sometimes it's a wrench passed down. Sometimes it's a son who knows he's loved. Sometimes it's just a man sitting on his porch knowing he didn't run. It started with a message from Vermont, then one from Ohio, then California, Georgia, Australia, emails, Instagram DMs, handwritten letters, all saying the same thing. "I saw your story. I never thought someone would say what I felt. Thank you for staying when someone else didn't." Jacob didn't know what to do with it. He wasn't an activist, wasn't a politician. He was a mechanic, a father. But apparently, being present had become powerful. The news segment from earlier, "The Father Who Stayed," had been reposted on a major national parenting page. Over 2 million views in 3 days. Comments flooded in. "I watched this with my teenage son. He cried. Then he hugged me. I was raised by a single dad, too. I never had words for what he gave me, until now. Can we get this man to write a book? Or, better yet, run for office? Jacob laughed when Ethan showed him that one. Dad, Caldwell for president? Ethan joked. I can barely run payroll, Jacob said. But deep down he was humbled, and a little afraid. Because when the world listens, you have to be sure your voice is worth hearing. At the local high school, things began to shift too. Young men, students Jacob didn't even know, started showing up at his garage after school. Some wanted jobs. Others just wanted to talk. One boy named Tyler asked if it was okay to sit in the back while Jacob worked. I don't know what to ask, he admitted. I just like being here. Jacob handed him a wrench. Then hold this. You learn by watching. Tyler became a regular, and so did others. The garage wasn't just a business anymore. It was becoming a place where young men learned how to stay. At the community center, a new program launched, the Stay Project, inspired by Jacob's story. Its mission to support, mentor, and resource young fathers, especially those from broken homes or facing early fatherhood alone. Jacob was invited to sit on the advisory board. He said no, I don't do boards. But when they asked him to help write the core values, he agreed. He sent back a single page. 1. Stay when it's hard. 2. Stay when you're tired. 3. Stay when no one claps. 4. Stay when they leave. 5. Stay because you're building something better. And when you can't stay anymore, teach someone else how. They didn't edit a word. Jacob's story reached other circles too. A university invited him to speak to a class on narratives of modern fatherhood. He declined, but he agreed to do a live Zoom Q&A. He sat in front of his laptop with a coffee mug and a baseball cap, looking out of place, but completely honest. A student asked, if you could go back to the night your wife left, would you stop her? Jacob took a long pause. No, he said. Everyone froze. Then he added, because if she hadn't left, I might never have learned what I was capable of. I might never have built what I did with my son. I don't thank her for leaving, but I do thank life for showing me. I could stand anyway. The next day, Ethan called from campus. They're using your story in class now, he said. Jacob blinked. What class? Sociology. Family dynamics. Also creative writing. Jacob laughed. Creative writing? I think they just wanted to understand real people. Then came the letter that hit him hardest. It came from a woman named Angela in North Carolina. She had 3 kids. No partner. No help. She'd seen the video, read the blog, and something clicked. Asterisk, I've spent years telling myself I failed my children, that if I was alone, I must have done something wrong. But you reminded me that showing up is enough, that loving them daily, even when exhausted, counts. You gave me back my dignity. Thank you. Asterisk, Jacob didn't respond. He didn't need to. He just folded the letter, put it next to the first one he got months ago, then sat quietly for a moment, hands clasped. He hadn't planned any of this. He just wanted to be a good dad. But somehow that had made the world feel a little less hopeless for people he'd never met. Later that month, the town mayor called. There was a local event, Family Day in the park, and they wanted to honor Jacob with a small award. He tried to say no. I don't need that. But Tanya talked him into it. This isn't about ego, she said. It's about giving other men permission to be proud of what they do quietly. So, Jacob stood on that stage, wearing the same shirt he wore to Ethan's graduation. The plaque read, "In honor of those who stayed," and taught us that quiet love is still love. After the ceremony, a boy came up maybe 10 years old. He looked nervous. Are you the guy from the internet? Jacob knelt. I guess so. The boy nodded. My mom says I'm lucky I got a dad who stayed. I think she's right. Jacob didn't cry, but his voice cracked when he said, you make sure he hears that. That night, back home, Jacob sat on the porch again. Old chair, cold beer, dog at his feet. He watched the sun go down, same as always. But this time he didn't feel small. He didn't feel invisible. He felt like a man who had finished something and begun something else, because the world had seen him. And more importantly, it had listened. The leaves had just begun to turn when Jacob got the call. "Hey," Ethan said over the phone. "You doing anything this weekend?" Jacob wiped his hands on a rag, grease on his knuckles. "Not unless you count brake pads on a '96 Dodge." Ethan chuckled. "Cool, 'cause I want to come home." Just like that. No reason. No emergency. Just home. Saturday afternoon, Jacob stood on the porch as Ethan's truck pulled in. He looked taller somehow, more confident, but his smile? Same as always. They didn't hug right away. Ethan just walked up, dropped his bag on the porch, and said, "Smells like diesel and toast in there. Just like I remember." Jacob grinned. "Wouldn't want you thinking I upgraded." Inside, things were simple. Same couch, same mugs, same photo of Ethan on his first birthday, frosting all over his face. "You ever gonna replace that picture?" Ethan asked. Jacob looked at it. "Nope, that's when you peaked." They spent the day fixing up an old motorcycle Jacob had picked up at an auction. Ethan handled the wiring. Jacob worked the engine. Music played low from the radio, country, some blues, the occasional classic rock song they both pretended not to like, but always sang along to. As the sun set, they sat out back, beers in hand, burgers on the grill. Ethan was quiet for a while. Then he said, "There's this girl I've been seeing. Real smart. Wants to be a social worker." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "You gonna mess it up?" "Probably," Ethan grinned. "But I'll try not to." Pause. Then Ethan added, "She asked what kind of man raised me. I told her you weren't flashy. You didn't make speeches, but you were always there. Every game. Every night, I had the flu. Every time I failed something." And she said, "That's rare." Jacob looked down at his beer. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. Later that evening, they walked down the road behind the house, the same stretch they used to walk when Ethan was little hand in hand. Now their strides matched. Ethan had questions. "You ever think about dating again?" Jacob smirked. "You offering referrals?" Ethan laughed. "Just saying. You gave your whole life to me. Maybe you should have something just for you now." Jacob didn't answer right away. Then said, "You were never something I gave my life to. You were my life." Ethan didn't speak, but the silence between them was warm, like a hand on the shoulder, like home. That night, before bed, Ethan left something on the kitchen table, a small wooden box. Jacob found it in the morning beside a note. "Open this only when you really, really feel like you did something right." He smiled, didn't open it yet, just placed it next to the coffee machine where it could wait. A week later, Jacob sat at the garage. It was quiet. The boys had gone home. Sunlight cut across the concrete in long stripes. He leaned back in his chair, looked around. The first wrench he ever bought. Ethan's old high school cleats still hanging on the wall. A photo of his son shaking hands with the college dean. The drawing from the anonymous child, "You helped, Dad." He breathed in deep, and for the first time in a long time, he felt done. Not defeated, just full. Then a knock at the door. A young man stood there. 17. Nervous. "You open?" he asked. Jacob looked at the clock. "Technically, no." The boy shifted. "I don't have a car. Just questions." Jacob opened the door wider. "You hungry?" The boy blinked. "Yeah. Come on in." They sat on the bench in the bay. Jacob handed him a sandwich from the cooler. The boy talked about his dad leaving, about dropping out, about not knowing what the hell he was supposed to do next. Jacob listened, didn't interrupt, didn't fix, just stayed. When the boy left an hour later, he turned and said, "Thanks. I didn't think anyone like you would have time for someone like me." Jacob replied, "Someone once told me, you don't measure a man by what he builds. You measure him by what he's willing to sit with when no one else will." That night, Jacob sat on the porch again. Same chair, same stars, but something was different. Something had shifted. He stood, walked inside, opened the wooden box Ethan left. Inside, a keychain engraved, "You stayed." A photo of Ethan at age 5, asleep on Jacob's chest, and a tiny note folded twice. It read, "Dad, asterisk, you didn't just give me life. You showed me how to live it. You were never the one who left. You were the one who stood still, So, I had something to come home to, asterisk. Jacob read it once, then again, and then for the first time in years he cried. Not for pain, not for loss, but for everything he'd finally received. Some men leave a legacy by building empires. Others do it by making sure one child never feels abandoned.